Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 2nd of July 2024. Couple of things. First of all, I'm going to hopefully be doing a live stream tonight with Erland and Danielle from Tochny, and we're going to talk about drones. We're going to talk about Erland's recent visit to Ukraine. It's hopefully going to be really, really interesting. That's going to be 7:30 tonight UK time, somewhere around there. I'll put the details up shortly. I'm likely to rant in my geopolitics video later. People telling me to stay in my lane, stuff like that. I'm like, right, both barrels. Because I am really afraid about the way our world is going in terms of Ukraine, in terms of Russia, in terms of the political makeup in the EU, in terms of the US, and democracy around the world, I think, is on a back foot, and we need to fight really hard to save it. The Ukrainians are doing that. We need to be doing that too. So I'm getting ready to rant. I'm just in an angry mood today. I was a bit down this morning. Like, politics can bring me down. Now I'm going through the different stages of grief. That's turned into anger. So we'll go through an angry phase today, I think. Anyway, let's get on with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveat supply, and you can find them in the description to the video below. 1,280 personnel lost. That's fairly high considering the range we've seen it. That's basically the high end of the 1,050 to 1,280 range that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, it has gone a lot higher than that. That one day where it reached 1,740, I think it was, or 1,780. Anyway, that was that very high day at the beginning of the Kharkiv offensive, and we've seen it fluctuate more recently above the 1,000. Now that's incredibly high, of course. Still remember the times when 1,000 was our benchmark, massive day of losses. Well, every day is over 1,000 at the moment, so I think that is significant. 8 tanks is about average, 16 armoured personnel vehicles is about average, and 56 artillery systems is about 3 times the average. 3 multiple launch rocket systems, 74 vehicles and fuel tanks is a huge loss there. Of course, a lot of these are going to be things like motorcycles and golf buggies and whatnot. Bukankas, SUVs. So it's very rarely do we see fuel tanks, for example, get taken out. The Russians are using a lot of those sorts of vehicles, and they are losing a lot of those sorts of vehicles. Anyway, 4 pieces of special equipment also there. Now, if we look at Andrew Perpetual's loss stats, we see a day of fairly significant losses for the Russians, but a lot of those in the civilian category. That's that big grey category there. Combat losses here are fairly typical. And the Ukrainian combat losses look to be about half of them. Let's see if that's about right. So 62 vehicles or pieces of equipment in total for the Russians, 33 for the Ukrainians. So about a 2-to-1 ratio, which isn't good enough really for the Ukrainians. 25 motorcycles plus, 25 plus motorcycles. Now, I was just mentioning that the vehicles and fuel tanks, that we're seeing a lot more of those sorts of vehicles, and here we are. 23 combat assets, 12 combat assets for the Ukrainians. So that's about a 2-to-1 as well. And then we've got Andrew talking about the Su-27s that may have been lost. I talked about that in the breaking news update I did last night. Maybe 2, he says there. There are still claims that these were decoys. Not mentioned there by Andrew, so he thinks these are Su-27s. A lot of people saying they've been there for years. It's you can see them on Google Earth, etc., etc., etc. And then pro-Russian saying we destroyed loads, and someone like Andrew in the middle here saying, well, we've got 1 destroyed, 1 damaged, possibly more. Who knows? We'll talk about that in a little while when we get into the strike section, but you've got Su-27s there that could be incredibly high value losses. When I talk about value, by the way, I'm talking about either more recent kit or very high capability kit like radar systems and things that cost a lot of money to replace, or new Western kit that's given to Ukrainians. Of course, for the Ukrainians, all of it is really quite high value. The Ukrainians can't afford to lose anything. So it's kind of a bit of a misnomer for me to keep saying high value kit. All of this has really high value to them. But when we look down further down the list and say, okay, 2 multiple launch rocket systems, those are, when I say that's high value, it's because compared to, say, a D-20 howitzer, your multiple launch rocket system has a what I think is a greater intuitive value. And then when we look at the infantry fighting vehicles, we have a BMP-2, Bradley, and 2 Marders, so all damaged. Those 3 Western bits of kit I would say are high value because they've been provided by the West recently, and they are better than the BMP-2 in terms of survivability and the armaments they have on them as well. You've got a couple of Humvees, a couple of Max Pros. Interesting that all of those, bar that BMP-2 there, in the IFV and APC and MRAP categories, all of them are Western provided pieces of kit, which is exactly what I've been saying recently. We have a boat that's been sunk, a couple of pieces of comms equipment, and then the rest of it, civilian vehicles, a couple of Bogdan trucks there too. So if those planes are genuine Ukrainian fighter jets, then that is a huge loss to the Ukrainians. That's a really terrible strike there, considering that the Iskander the cluster munition came after a unitary warhead hit there and nothing happened, which is why people are saying these look like they were obsolete planes, because there was a strike, then the reconnaissance drone was hanging around, and then later there was another strike, and there was no scrambling of those jets in the intervening period. But that could also just show really poor form for the Ukrainians. I don't know. Okay, Tor M2 there. A Russian air defense system has been damaged. Electronic warfare, engineering vehicle, a sunk boat as well. A couple of D-30 howitzers and a Mushta S. And then we're on to the tanks, where we have a T-90M damaged by an FPV drone. That's the most recent tank that they use. Otherwise, fairly normal. A couple of T-80s, we'll talk about them in a second. Tracked garden shed, so a tank that's had all that carry-on built on top, all the metal cope cages and corrugated iron and whatnot. Then we have infantry fighting vehicles. Now, all 100% of these are destroyed. 100% of the APCs are destroyed, and virtually all of the civilian vehicles are destroyed. So the Russians here have a very high percentage of destroyed against damaged. The Ukrainians slightly better there, so that's worth noting. But yeah, just a huge number of motorcycles taken out, and that'll be from a bit of footage we're just about to look at in a second. NTLBs and BMPs taken out as well, destroyed. So fairly heavy losses, but of course, if those Su-27s are genuine, then they completely counteract all of the losses from the Russians there. Now, Zelensky has said the ratio of Ukrainian and Russian military personnel losses at this stage of the war is 1-6. He said that on the 30th of June in an interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Interesting newspaper. That's one that's just come out and said, don't think about Biden having to give up and be replaced. Trump should be the one doing that. That's the paper that's done that. Anyway, that's to digress. So that's interesting. If it's true, obviously that's really good for the Ukrainians. They need that. That's the kind of ratio that they have to exist on, given that the Russian population is that much bigger than the Ukrainian population. If they can continue to exact that kind of ratio cost on Russia, then Ukraine can prevail in this war. 6-1 is a devastating figure. But of course, that if anyone's going to give you a rosy picture of the figures, well, it depends. You could argue either way. You could argue he could downplay things to get more aid and say things are more desperate than they are. Or you can say, hey, everything's rosy, everything's brilliant, to try and appeal to his domestic audience, and also say how well they are using the supplied equipment. So there's different arguments that can be applied to whether he's going to be telling the truth or not here, but obviously take it with a pinch of salt. Now, there's a video that's come out here. I can't show it to you. This woman is taken out. A Russian woman on the front lines is hit by a drone, gets seen to by another Russian woman by the looks of it, and then another drone comes along and hits them. I think there's 3 of them there at one point. So more Russian women appearing at the front, says Jay in Kiev. So This is the idea that they are probably recruiting female convicts from prison to go to the front line to fight for the Russian army, and that suggests a desperation in terms of mobilization, which fits in line with all sorts of other data points that we look at on a daily basis, such as the huge losses that they're incurring, 6-to-1 ratio loss claimed by Zelensky, and the idea that they are therefore losing 30-odd thousand a month. Last month, 35,000, according to the General Staff. And that would mean that the recruiting needs to go deeper and wider than it otherwise was. And that means there are going to be attempts to find new sources for personnel. Now here, I don't want to show you that too closely, but each one of those red squares is a dead body around this video, and this is a video with a huge number of motorbikes. So the AFU destroyed a column of Russian occupiers in a Vuhledar direction among the graveyard of enemy armoured vehicles. The considerable number of destroyed motorcycles draws attention to itself, and this is where Andrew Perpetua's long list of motorcycles comes from, no doubt. The Russian command sent the occupiers on motorcycles into the battle on a par with heavy equipment. That is, quote, deliberately threw manpower under the Ukrainian combine of death without any chance of survival, writes Ukrainian journalist Yuri Butasov, who's a fairly honest journalist there. He calls out things when they're going badly for Ukraine, but here just very obviously distasteful of the way that Russia are throwing their human beings into the grinder without any care for life. And yeah, it's quite an incredible bit of footage that all of these are linked below. Graveyard of Russian motorcycles, approximately 24 motorcycles just on this spot. So when I've talked previously about whether these are suboptimal or not, whether these are the right things to be used, of course, they offer no protection. If you're going to be hit with whatever was hammering this column, you're going to survive for a shorter period of time riding on top of a motorcycle compared to inside a tank. Right. Talking about T-80 tanks, as I said earlier, analysis of the number of T-80B and BV tanks at long-term storage bases. Since the beginning of the war, 900 tanks have been removed from the storage. The quantity is reduced from 1,200 to 300. And of course, what you got to remember is those that are left, you take out the easy ones first, ones that don't need any work, ones that need a little bit of work, and you cannibalize, you're cannibalizing. And then when you get down probably to 300, you've got 300 vehicles that can't be used, or they require full-on restoration, full-on fixing. And these are the ones that are kind of going into the production numbers for the Russian tanks. We're making 1,500 tanks a year. Of course, how many are being made from new? Well, maybe 20 a month if you're lucky. The rest of those are going to be these kinds of tanks. But maximum quantity inside the hangars can be 800 though. There are some possibly that you can't see. So that's why there's a really wide margin here. But the trajectory is the same either way. And you've gone down from 1,200 at the beginning of the war, visible tanks, right to this point here where you've got virtually none left. And those that are left are going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, maybe there's a big scope for loads more if there are lots in the garages. That's your maximum. If you want to be really charitable to Russia, then you say they've got all of these tanks in garages you just can't see. But this analysis has said, well, the estimated actual usable tanks, probably a few in the garages, and that's going up to, well, if we're about 6th of 2025 there, so June 2025, you've probably got about, that's the kind of 300 mark. So really, quantities reduced to 300 is the estimation. And usable, of course, does a lot of heavy lifting. How usable? I mean, I doubt those are tanks you can just get out now and send to the front. So they're usable if you fix them up. And how long would it take to fix them up? And what is your output per month? But this just shows that the Russians are having their stocks dwindled in a significant way. Right, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. This is a bit of drone footage in the Tokmak direction, and it's a drone hitting a locomotive. It hits a train. I can show you this because it really shouldn't give you any cause for alarm. Now, unfortunately, it misses hitting the front of the locomotive there, because that would have done most of the damage and would have possibly incapacitated the train. I bet this just bounces off the roof, really. You can see it there, little puff of smoke. I doubt it causes the train to stop or anything, but this is important for two reasons. One, it's 30 kilometers from the front line, so that's a new record for that kind of FPV drone, at least according to Tim White here. And it's hit a moving locomotive, which means it's pulling a fuel train, which means that you start being able to load some of these drones up with heavier munitions, and you can start doing some serious damage to Russian railway logistics. That is significant. I have seen footage of drones being able to carry heavier and heavier weights. There was one carrying a TM62 mine the other day, which was it 10 kilograms of mine? And that's pretty substantial. In fact, they are laying mines with these drones at the moment, causing the Russians all sorts of problems, because you get these well-used tracks or roads that they know are cleared, or they think are cleared, because they do get cleared. And then, lo and behold, in the night, a drone comes along and drops some munitions, drops some mines, and then the Russians are in trouble yet again. Anyway, one to watch out for, the FPV drones on trains. Right, moving on to distance munitions, and it seems to have been a very quiet night in terms of missile and drone strikes, large-scale ones across the border. So I'm just going to show you some hits from both yesterday and today. So right now, there's a column of smoke covering the Russian Kursk region somewhere. According to Russian media, local media reports that it may be a military base on fire. We're waiting for details, says Flash News. And indeed, here we have some more on that. Some Russian media report that it is a Central 3754 aviation technical base, a military base 13830. According to them, a large number of vehicles serving aviation were located there. And that is a large fire in a Kursk area of Russia. So we'll watch out for that, see if anything comes from that. Yesterday, Makivka, there's a strike there somewhere. These sort of things happen all the time, every day, without us really realizing that there are these HIMARS strikes that are taking place as the Russians are having different targets being hit. The Ukrainians are trying their very best to degrade the Russian capabilities. A strong fire started and several explosions in Novokakhovka, so that's the left bank. That's the Russian-occupied side of the bank by what was the dam there. Novokakhovka, occupied left bank of the Kherson region. So that was hit yesterday. And then today is this. Crimean Bridge has been closed for an hour as missiles are fired at the occupied peninsula. Some very interesting photos emerging from a Ukrainian point of view. Of course, Russia says its air defense worked. So there is some very black smoke there. Looks like oil burning, and yeah. So air defense supposedly worked. Yeah, we'll see. And that was where's that gone now? It's disappeared. Let me find it. Yeah, that one with the smoke ring there. Oh dear. What am I doing? The Crimea Wind Telegram channel says this smoke ring is consistent with air defense being hit. They believe a military base may have been hit on the outskirts of Sevastopol. So it could be some serious targets being taken out in Crimea at the moment. And a very nice video just in capturing the moment of the strike on occupied Crimea, or how Russia's air defense worked to put the other side of the argument across. So, in other words, doesn't look like the air defense really did work, and the Russians are talking a load of caca. There you go, a big old explosion somewhere in Crimea. Now, on the other hand, Kherson, the city, was heavily shelled last night. This isn't distance, it's not cruise missiles or drones. These are multiple launch rocket systems firing to Kherson. As I keep telling you, I've been there. There are no military targets there. Every time they hit Kherson, it is terrorism. It's a war crime. They are just saying to the Ukrainians, if we can't have it, you can't have it. It's horrible. At least 3 more injuries. One of the wounded was an 80-year-old man who has chest, hand, foot explosive and brain injuries. It's just absolutely not acceptable of the Russians to keep doing that. Right, now going to this strike on Mirod Air Base in Poltava. This is what happened yesterday. I did that breaking news video on it. US forbids Ukraine from striking Russian airfields while the Russians hit Ukraine's on a daily basis. I just don't get this. For goodness sake, Sullivan and the Biden administration, let the Ukrainians hit the Russian air bases. It is absolutely unfair. Why you would require someone to fight with one hand tied behind their back, I don't know. I just don't get it. But there you go. Ilya Ponomarenko was railing against this. There must be responsibility for chronically allowing such things to happen in Ukraine's air force. Systemic negligence may get us all 6 feet under in this war. So the situation was supposedly a unitary warhead hit the airfield. You've got this reconnaissance drone in the air. A unitary warhead hit it somewhere, but kind of missed. I think it was that one there, which is at the end of this video. That's possibly the unitary warhead, but I'm not sure. But then there was a cluster munition that hit here on the airfield, and it took out, supposedly, according to the Russians, lots of Su-27s. According to Andrew Perpetua, maybe one destroyed, one damaged, and some others think more. There are planes just left out on those aprons. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have minimized that. People are saying, well, actually, those planes on those aprons have been there for some was telling me, for 30 years. Someone in my thread yesterday on the breaking news video was saying, I've been to that airbase and you had these planes all over the shop and they were not in a good state. I only saw one working plane at that airbase. That was someone on my thread. Now, could be psyops, could be someone who's from the Ukrainians trying to throw in their bit of psyop, but bit of disinformation. But I don't know. I mean, there are people from both sides of the argument presenting pretty good cases. I mean, there's definitely something on those aprons. How damaged those somethings are is, I think, beyond the ability of this resolution imagery to illustrate. Nonetheless, it hasn't stopped people, sounding off about this. Tim White, news I feared is now seemingly confirmed. Ukraine looks to have lost Su-27 fighters and possibly quite a few of them. This is the Mirod airfield in Poltava, which was attacked twice today. It's a disgraceful waste and someone's head has to roll for this. As I reported, there were 2 missile strikes there today. There was a reconnaissance drone loitering between Russia's attacks, correcting the miss of the first, ensuring a hit with cluster munitions on a ballistic Iskander for the second. Why were the jets unprotected? And someone here, Military Watch, saying on the 1st of July yesterday, the Russians carried out multiple attacks, missile attacks on the Mirod airbase in Poltava. 2 Ukrainian Su-27 fighters were completely destroyed, and up to 4 more were damaged, some likely beyond repair. Now, that might well not be the case. We'll just go through to look at what they say. First frames of the video show the situation before the attack. Numbers 1 and 4 are Su-27s parked in the same spot for many months. Almost certainly retired airframes. Numbers 2 and 3 weren't there a few days ago. Either operational jets or retired airframes used as decoys. So they might well be operational jets. But these 2 appear to be long-time inhabitants of those aprons there. Now, the first attack... not shown in the video, a Su-27, so that first one wasn't shown, marked as number 5 in the map above, was destroyed at these coordinates. So that is to say, number 5, this one was destroyed in the first missile attack, but that's not shown in the video. Judging by the burn marks, the aircraft was fueled, apparently an operational jet. There you go. So the fact that there's black around that would indicate possibly that it's operational. Shortly after the first attack, 3 more Su-27s fighters were relocated into the revetments in the western part of the base. The fact that immediately after the first attack, all 3 Su-27 were moved into protection of the revetments indicates that they were operational jets. So this goes against what some people have been saying and what I suggested last night. There is also some kind of equipment in front of the Su-27 marked number 6. Probably the plane was being prepared for takeoff. So this is this one. Some equipment there, if you can just see that. Anyway, during the second attack, the cluster munitions were used. It looks like up to 4 Su-27 fighters marked 2, 3, and 6, and 7 were damaged. The extent of the damage is unclear, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of the aircraft couldn't be repaired. The third attack, so this explains that next, it wasn't there were actually 3 missiles then. The third attack completely destroyed the light aircraft shelter. Due to very close proximity to the explosion, the Su-27 parked outside was most likely either destroyed or damaged beyond repair, and the coordinates are given. It's unclear whether another Su-27 was inside. And that is that explosion that we saw at the end of the video there. So since early 2023, a few Su-27, maybe 3, were parked at these coordinates. Looked like during this time one was completely destroyed and another severely damaged, almost certainly retired airframes. This still frame was taken after the second attack. Can't decide whether these old battered airframes received more damage or if it's just an illusion caused by the poor quality of the video. And in August 2022, 3 Su-27 decoys were painted onto the tarmac of these coordinates. So that's something we've seen the Russians do quite a bit. Ukrainians did that back in 2022 as well. So it looks like there were some planes that were taken out there. So this has led Andrew Perpetua to conclude that, as far as he's concerned, at least one is destroyed. One is damaged, but he says, of course, in his piece to the side here, Control 0, that maybe 2. One was destroyed, maybe 2. And I don't know if he means that the damaged one might have been destroyed as well, but it doesn't give any indication that others were that were taken out or might have been taken out. So useful analysis there from the Military Watch. Now, the Ukrainian official claim from Yuri Ignat, he acknowledged the Russian missile strikes on the base and admitted that they caused losses, though, according to him, not as big as claimed by the Russians. In his statement, he also defended the personnel of the Ukrainian Air Force after some people started blaming certain commanders for negligence. I mean, it seems to me that, the problem is yet again these medium-range reconnaissance drones that are able to operate, it appears, with at least some kind of impunity around these really high-value targets. Now, you got to also remember that those drones are probably quite far away from the airfield, hence the poor resolution, using cameras that are zoomed as much as possible to give the coordinates. And of course you can match those coordinates, what it can see on the screen, with the Google Earth imagery of that airbase, right? You can tell exactly where the aprons are, and you can get a vague understanding of where the plane will sit on any given apron from the imagery from that low resolution zoomed in reconnaissance drone. And so that's good enough to target those planes. Of course, they know where the airbase is. You can fling missiles into that airbase any day of the week, right? What they want to know is what planes are on what apron at any one time, and so that they can, as accurately as possible, hit as much equipment as possible. And they seem to have done a job there on the Ukrainian Air Force, and that is going to really smart. Guerrilla movement Atesh has recorded the placement of Russian air defense system, the Tor M2MK, in Sevastopol, not far from the beach. Such a tactical move of the Russian occupiers once again endangers the lives of the civilian residents of Sevastopol, because debris from anti-aircraft missiles and downed weapons that follow Russian military facilities will fall on the heads of vacationers on nearby beaches. This is something that they appear to be happy enough to do. Let the Russians holiday on those beaches while positioning fairly high value air defense systems nearby that might well attract the attention of Ukrainian drones and missiles. Now, just to let you know that I was going to do this a little bit later. Where was it? It's this one, I think. Yeah, people from Russia are still dying to get to the occupied Crimea. Queues on the bridge all day, peaking at over 1,000 cars. Tour operators say bookings plunged 20% after the recent beach deaths, but are still up on last year's numbers. So the Russians are still, it appears, striving to get to Crimea. I imagine the holidays are fairly cheap there. We have seen that it's still fairly run down. We saw that video the other day of one beachfront, although it's not as nice as those Sevastopol beaches, but somewhere else. But it seemed to be, there've been these fortifications built there have been these fortifications built in a lot of these holiday destinations, so it's not going to be ideal anyway. But I don't think there's been any investment in any of these or many of them. Many of the holiday destinations for an awful long time now, or for a couple of years. So we are going on to something that I'm going to report today, but I could report every day. Or most days, there are examples of this taking place. This is an FSB agent group, according to Nexter, which included 2 military officers and their accomplice, and they were detained in Odessa. The agents were searching for locations of air defense systems that cover Odessa. In case of detection of necessary targets, covertly photographed them and marked the corresponding geolocation on Google Maps. The traitors also installed camouflage wireless magnetic cameras on the territory of the seaport of Odessa. For conspiracy, enemy agents used a cab service, and their accomplice disguised her appearance by constantly changing wigs. The traitors face life imprisonment. Such a shame that there are these people, and you're going to expect this in Ukraine as a whole. There are plenty of Russian sympathizers there for sure, but it's doubly painful when these are serving members to military officers by all accounts, or by this account at least. Okay, while Russia makes some incremental battlefield gains, says the Wall Street Journal, the sense is that the Ukrainians have been pretty strategic in some of their strikes and movements and are holding their own, said a senior US Defense Department official. I think Ukraine have actually had a fairly decent summer period where they have slowed the Russian offensive to a grinding, I wouldn't quite say halt, but they are making grinding gains, the Russians, at fairly big cost, and the Russian troops and equipment stockpiles, I think, are dwindling. They need to mobilize, and while they are having their successes here and there, such as with the airbase that was hit yesterday, the Ukrainians are having, I think, more significant success in hitting military targets than the Russians. And as mentioned here, the Ukrainians have been pretty strategic in some of their strikes and movements. Now, the challenge for the Ukrainians is, like I always say, the energy infrastructure. That is where the Russians have really crippled Ukraine. And in fact, that is super, super important because it underwrites their ability to produce weaponry. It underwrites their ability to have a functioning economy. And the Ukrainians are going to have to do something serious about that. Okay, the huge power cut in Belgorod yesterday was having a knock-on effect. Kursk warned of possible shortages due to technological violations in neighbouring regions, while in Voronezh, electricity supply was limited due to overload. So there was a substation that was hit yesterday, and that caused a right old issue in Belgorod, but it appears to have had knock-on effects into the neighbouring regions as well. Russia getting a taste of its own medicine there, I would have thought. And then finally, we're just going to look at, just because this seems pretty startling, Russia, Dukovka village in the Kurgan region. A bridge was destroyed by the flood, so residents put up this to reach the shops and the post office. Russia spends $500 million to $1 billion a day on the war against Ukraine, and it doesn't give a damn about its own citizens, says Anton Gerashchenko. And here we have a babushka working on building a bridge. My goodness, mind you, who am I to pass judgment? She's moving much better than I would. That's for sure. I would be straight in that water. I'm going to get to. You can get a T-shirt that says "I'm not drunk. I've got MS." Okay, I might be a little drunk, but it's just great because when I stumble down the road. If I walk anywhere, I just look like I'm drunk the whole time because of my multiple sclerosis. And yeah, and I want people to know I'm not drunk. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.